Have you ever looked in the mirror and felt a profound sense of dislocation? As if the person staring back at you is a stranger. Not just older, not just tired, but fundamentally someone else. Someone you don't know, and worse, someone you don't trust. I have. For 2 years, that stranger was me. It took me another year to understand that she wasn't a stranger at all. She was a survivor, and the person I was before. She was the person he tried to erase. This is the story of how I lost myself, and the long, painful road I took to find my way back. Before I met Leo, my world was my own. It was a good world. I had a job I was proud of in graphic design, a small but fiercely loyal circle of friends and hobbies that filled me with joy. I loved hiking on weekends, getting my hands dirty with pottery, and I had a laugh that was, according to my friends, way too loud for my body. My sense of self was my compass. I trusted my instincts, my memories, my feelings. They were the very foundation of who I was. And then, I met him. It was at an art gallery opening. I was looking at this big abstract painting, trying to seem like I understood it, when he walked up beside me. He was charming, intelligent, and he listened to me with an intensity that felt like a spotlight. When I talked about my design work, his eyes didn't glaze over. He asked thoughtful questions. When I told a joke, he threw his head back and laughed. He made me feel like the most fascinating person in the room. The first few months were a blur of perfect dates and grand gestures. He'd surprise me with weekend trips, leave poetry on my pillow, and tell me things like, "I feel like I've been waiting my whole life to meet someone who understands me like you do." It was intoxicating. It felt like I had finally found the missing piece of my soul. He wasn't just my boyfriend. He was becoming my entire world. And that, I see now, was the first mistake. A world should be vast and full of stars, not centered on a single sun. Because when that sun decides to burn you, there's nowhere left to hide. The change was subtle. So subtle, I didn't even notice it at first. It started with small things, little seeds of doubt planted in the most casual conversations. I remember one of the first times so clearly. We were supposed to meet his friends for dinner at 8 p.m. I was ready to go at 7:45, waiting by the door. He came out of the bedroom, looked at the clock, and sighed dramatically. "Babe," he said, "why are you always running late? I told you we had to be there at 7:30. Now we're going to look rude." I was baffled. "What?" "No, you said 8. I wrote it down. I remember you saying it specifically because you knew my last work meeting ran until 6:30. He just shook his head with this little, pitying smile. "You're so forgetful sometimes, sweetie. It's okay. Your mind is always buzzing with creative ideas. You must just misremember things. Come on, let's just go." I was so sure he'd said 8. But the way he said it, so calm, so certain, so loving. It was easier to believe I'd made a mistake than to believe he was lying. So I apologized. That became a pattern. Me, apologizing for things I was sure I hadn't done. Soon, he was questioning my memory about everything. Conversations we'd had, promises he'd made. "I never said I'd go with you to your parents this weekend. You must have dreamt that. Or you lost your keys again. You're so scatterbrained. You'd lose your head if it wasn't attached." Every time, he'd deliver the line with a gentle touch that made me feel like he was the patient, stable one, and I was the flighty, unreliable mess he had to manage. I started to believe it. The next phase was isolation. It wasn't with fences or locked doors. It was with words. My best friend, Sarah, was the first to go. After I'd get off the phone with her, laughing, Leo would sigh. "Does Sarah ever have anything positive to say? I worry she's a bad influence on you." He never forbade me from seeing her. He was too clever for that. He just made the idea of it so exhausting. He made me feel like I had to choose between my friend and his happiness. In the fog of his love, I chose him. One by one, my friends were painted as too dramatic or jealous of our relationship. My world, which was once so full, began to shrink until it was just me and him. My pottery wheel gathered dust in the corner because he'd complained the clay made a mess. We stopped hiking because he said it was boring. My loud laugh became quieter. I was molding myself into the person he wanted, losing pieces of the real me with every compromise. The worst part was how he weaponized my emotions. Anytime I tried to voice a concern, to push back on his version of reality, he'd say, "Look at you. You're getting hysterical. You're too sensitive. We can't have a normal conversation when you get like this." He would create problems just to solve them. I remember one day, a huge presentation file I'd been working on for a week vanished from our shared computer. I had a full-blown panic attack. Leo spent an hour, calmly, looking for it before he miraculously found it in some obscure folder. He held me as I cried with relief, stroking my hair. "See, honey?" he cooed. "It was right here. You get so worked up you can't even think straight. It's okay. I'm here. I'll take care of you." He was the arsonist and the firefighter, the storm and the shelter. I hit my lowest point about a year and a half in. I was looking in the mirror one morning, and my expression scared me. It was blank, defeated. There was no spark, no joy, no confidence. Just fear. I was constantly anxious, walking on eggshells. My every thought filtered through a lens of, what would Leo think? My compass was broken. I was lost. The turning point didn't come with a lightning strike. It was a whisper. It came from my mother. I hadn't seen my family in months. Leo always had an excuse. But my mum called, her voice firm. She was coming to the city and she was taking me to lunch. It wasn't a request. I spent the first 20 minutes of that lunch giving her the official story. Leo was wonderful. I was happy, just stressed from work. My mother just listened, her gaze steady. Then she asked me the question that shattered everything. "Clara," she said, "when was the last time you felt like yourself?" I couldn't answer. I just broke down right there in the middle of the cafe and told her everything. The forgotten conversations, the overly sensitive feelings, the lost keys. As the words tumbled out, they started to sound different. Not like my failings, but like a pattern of cruelty. My mother just held my hand and said the 6 words that saved my life. "That is not your fault." The spell was broken. I went home that day with a tiny, flickering flame of my old self ignited. The final proof came a week later. I had suspected he was reading my journal, something he'd laughed off as my paranoia. So I set a trap. I wrote a fake entry about a fictional job offer in another city. Before closing the journal, I wedged a tiny, almost invisible thread between the pages. The next day, after he'd been home alone, I checked. The thread was gone. That night, I confronted him. I didn't yell. My voice was eerily calm. "You read my journal," I said. He started with the usual script. "What? Clara, no. Why would you even think that? You're being paranoid again. The thread is gone, Leo." He stared at me, and for the first time, the mask of calm concern slipped. Just for a second, I saw a flash of pure rage in his eyes. He saw he was losing control. "You set a trap for me," he snarled. "That's insane. You're actually crazy." But the words didn't hurt me anymore. They sounded hollow, desperate. He was right. I had set a trap. The old me never would have done that. But the old me wasn't a survivor. "I'm not crazy," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "I'm just finally seeing you for who you are." I packed a bag that night. He cycled through every tactic in his playbook. He begged, he cried, he told me I was throwing away the best thing that ever happened to me. Then he got angry, telling me I wouldn't survive without him. Then he became the charming man from the art gallery again, promising to change, promising everything would be different. It was like watching an actor run through his entire repertoire. But I just kept putting clothes in my suitcase. The love I felt for him was still there, but it was tangled up with a new, powerful instinct: self-preservation. Leaving was the hardest and easiest thing I've ever done. The first few weeks were a special kind of hell. His voice was a permanent resident in my head, criticizing everything I did. I'd misplace my wallet and I'd hear him, scatterbrained. I'd cry and I'd hear him, hysterical. I had to detox not just from a person, but from a reality he had built around me. I stayed with my mom. I tentatively called Sarah, my old best friend, stammering out an apology. She cut me off. "You don't have to apologize," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Just come over." When she opened her door and hugged me, I felt a piece of my own soul click back into place. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I started therapy, where I was finally given the vocabulary for what I'd endured: gaslighting, emotional abuse, trauma bonding. Giving it a name took away some of its shadowy power. One weekend, I forced myself to go to the pottery studio. My hands felt clumsy on the clay at first, foreign. But as the wheel started to spin, something inside me settled. The feeling of creating something with my own hands, something real and solid that no one could tell me I was imagining, was medicine. I went on a hike by myself, and for the first time in years, the silence of the woods wasn't lonely, it was peaceful. I was relearning how to be in my own company. It's been 2 years since I left. The healing isn't a straight line. There are still days when that ghost of a voice whispers doubt in my ear. But now, I have my own voice to answer it. And now, when I look in the mirror, I don't see a stranger anymore. I don't see the naive girl I was before I met him either. I see her, but she's different. There are faint lines of sadness around my eyes that weren't there before, but there's also a strength in my gaze I never had. I see a woman who walked through fire and didn't burn to ash. I see a woman who learned to trust her own compass again, even after it was shattered. I see a woman who can laugh loudly again. I see me, and for the first time in a very long time, I am so glad to see her. It's a funny thing about healing. You imagine it as a destination you finally arrive at, a quiet, sunny shore after a brutal storm. For a long time, that's what it felt like for me. The 2 years after I left Leo were about rebuilding that shore, stone by painful stone. I had my friendships back, especially with Sarah. My work in graphic design was thriving. My little pottery studio was my sanctuary, a place where I could create order and beauty from a lump of chaotic clay. The voice in my head, his voice, had finally faded. It was replaced by my own. I trusted my instincts again. I could look in the mirror and not just recognize the woman staring back, but feel a deep sense of pride and affection for her. She was a survivor. She was me. I had arrived. Or so I thought. It turns out healing isn't a destination. It's a landscape you learn to navigate. And sometimes, out of nowhere, an echo from the old world finds its way in. It happened on a Tuesday. I was at my desk, finalizing a design proposal, feeling that familiar, satisfying buzz of creative focus. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. I glanced at it, expecting spam or a wrong number. But my blood ran cold. My breath caught in my throat. "Clara, I know it's been a very long time, and I have no right to ask you to read this, but I have to try. I've been in therapy for the last 18 months. I've done the work. And I needed to say from the bottom of my soul that I am sorry. For everything. It was signed, Leo. Just seeing his name felt like a physical blow. Suddenly, I wasn't in my bright, airy office. I was back in our old apartment, the air thick with tension, my hands trembling. The old script started playing in my head. Is he being sincere? Am I supposed to answer? What's the right thing to do? I felt a phantom wave of anxiety, the old fear that any choice I made would be the wrong one. I immediately screenshotted it and sent it to Sarah with the message. Code read. Her reply was instant. Block. Delete. Do not engage. I'm coming over after work with wine and outrage. Her decisiveness was the anchor I needed. She was right. Engaging was a trap. So I blocked the number, took a few shaky breaths and tried to focus on my work. But the breach had been made. A ghost had walked through the walls of the safe house I'd built for myself. That night, I barely slept. A week went by. Then two. I started to relax. It was a one-time thing, I told myself. A final, desperate message into the void. Then I got an email at work. It was from a senior partner at a major new firm. Our company was trying to land as a client. The partner was CCing me to set up an introductory meeting between their team and mine. And there, on the list of their team members, was his name. Leo Miller, project lead. I felt the floor drop out from under me. This was different. This wasn't a private text I could ignore. This was my career. He had found a way back into my life through a door I was required to open. I told my boss, Mark, that I had a personal history with one of the client leads, and that I'd prefer if another designer handled the project. Mark was understanding, but pragmatic. Clara, your portfolio is the reason they reached out to us. You're our best shot. Can you handle it? If it's truly impossible, I'll understand. But it would be a huge opportunity. I felt trapped. If I said no, I was letting Leo dictate my career path, letting him shrink my world again. If I said yes, I had to face him. I spent a weekend wrestling with it, talking for hours with my mom and my therapist, Dr. Evans. He is testing your boundaries, Clara, Dr. Evans said. He may have found this opportunity by accident, or he may have engineered it. In either case, your power lies in how you choose to respond. Not by reacting to him, but by acting for yourself. I decided to take the project. I would not let him have that power over me. I would be professional, clinical, and detached. I would treat him like any other colleague. This was my test. A final exam for my healing. The day of the video conference, my heart hammered against my ribs. I laid out my notes, arranged my face into a mask of calm professionalism, and clicked join meeting. A grid of faces popped up. And then, there he was. He looked older, a few grey hairs at his temples. When he saw me, he didn't register shock. He just gave a small, sad, knowing smile. It was a look that said, "Here we are again." The meeting was a surreal out-of-body experience. I'd presented my initial concepts, my voice steady, my arguments clear. I could feel his eyes on me the entire time. When I finished, the senior partner was impressed. Then he turned to Leo. "Leo, your thoughts?" Leo unmuted himself. His voice was the same, that smooth, confident baritone that had once been my favorite sound in the world. "I think the concepts are brilliant," he said, looking directly at me through the screen. "Truly exceptional. Clara has always been an incredible talent. She has a way of seeing the world that is just unparalleled." The room was silent. To everyone else, it was a generous compliment. A colleague lifting up another. But I knew what it was. It was a subtle act of ownership. I know her. I know her talent. I discovered it, He was reframing my success, which I had earned in spite of him, as something he had always known and cultivated. It was gaslighting, version 2.0. So subtle, no one else could see it. After the meeting, I got an email. From him. "You were incredible today. I'm not surprised. Could we grab a quick coffee tomorrow? Just 15 minutes. For the sake of the project, I think it would be good to clear the air, so we can have a smooth working relationship." Every fiber of my being screamed nitrogen monoxide. But the professional part of me, the part that didn't want to be seen as difficult or emotional, felt the pressure. I agreed. 1 coffee. 15 minutes. In a public place. I would set the terms. We met at a busy cafe near my office. I got there first and chose a small table in the middle of the room, not a cozy booth in the corner. When he walked in, he looked different than he had on screen. More real. He smiled, that same charming smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you for meeting me," he began. He didn't offer excuses. He launched into a well-rehearsed, therapy-approved mea culpa. He used all the right words. I was insecure. My behavior was emotionally abusive. I was projecting my own failures onto you. I was a toxic person. He admitted to some of it. Not everything, I noticed. He didn't mention the lies about my friends or the sabotage. He painted a picture of a flawed man who had lost his way, not a calculated manipulator. "I just want you to know," he finished, leaning in slightly, "that I have never stopped regretting what I lost. And seeing you today, so successful, so confident, it makes me happy. I always knew you had this in you. I'm so proud of the woman you've become." And there it was again. That word. Proud, as if he were my father, my mentor. As if my growth was a project he had overseen. The old me would have been confused, maybe even flattered. But the new me saw it with chilling clarity. He hadn't changed. He had just gotten a better vocabulary. His goal wasn't to apologize, it was to gauge my reaction. To see if the door was still unlocked. To see if he could, once again, become the arbiter of my reality. This time as the reformed man who was proud of me. I looked at him, truly looked at him for the first time without fear or leftover love. And I saw a hollow man. A man whose sense of self was so weak he had to feed on the light of others. I gave a small, polite smile. "Thank you for the apology, Leo. I appreciate it." I stood up. He looked surprised. "That's it? You're leaving?" "Our 15 minutes are up," I said, my voice even. "I have to get back to work." I walked out of that cafe with my head held high. There was no screaming match, no dramatic confrontation. There was just the quiet, profound realization that he had absolutely no power over me anymore. The echo had returned, and I had simply listened to it, recognized it for what it was, and let it fade. That evening, I didn't call Sarah in a panic. I didn't need wine or outrage. I went to my studio, put on some music, and sat down at my wheel. As the clay spun under my hands, I knew what I had to do. I wrote one last email. "Leo, I acknowledge your apology. My healing, however, was never contingent on your remorse. It was my own work. The life I have now, the success I've earned, and the peace I feel are mine. I did not achieve them because of you, or even in spite of you. I achieved them for myself. They exist because I am no longer in your orbit. And for that peace to continue, that distance must be permanent. Therefore, I am requesting to be taken off our shared project, effective immediately. This is not a negotiation. It is a non-negotiable boundary for my well-being. I wish you well, from a distance." I hit send. Then I blocked his email address. I forwarded a copy to my boss and my therapist. I felt no anger, no sadness, just a quiet, clean slate finality. I know now that healing isn't a place you get to and then build a fortress around. It's a compass you carry inside you. The storm might circle back, the echoes might call out, but you learn to trust your own true north. And as I sat there, my hands covered in clay, creating something new and strong and entirely my own, I looked around my quiet studio, my safe harbor. I was the keeper of my own peace, and for the first time I knew, deep in my bones, that no one could ever take that from me again.